We're going to, we need to click, the counter should say 40, not 50. Can it say 40? Well, whoever's going to fix the counter, make it 40. Okay, I believe this is the technology panel, big crypto technology panel. Okay, right? What's the title?
Blockchain? Right?
Blockchain.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. We really know what we're doing here. That's what I'm trying to get that across to you. Okay, I'm going to moderate from the floor, and these guys are all providing a ton of expertise in the blockchain space. Marco, why don't you start your introduction, and I'll let you introduce yourselves.
All right, hi, I'm Marco Peerboom. I'm the CTO at Company Zero, and we are actually the ones who have developed Decred. You might have heard of us. If not, come chat to me here in a little bit at the booth.
Hi, my name is Elisabeth Grote Møller. I come from Copenhagen, Denmark, and I am the design person behind startups in Copenhagen especially, and I want to create better designs so we can make Bitcoin and blockchain more mainstream.
I'm Daniel Krawitz. I'm a software engineer at Stash, and we're building on top of the open transactions protocol. We just released our wallet, so you should check that out in the Android App Store.
How y'all doing? Dylan from Houston, CEO of Spective. We're working on some technologies in the advertising space and the virtual reality space.
Hi, I'm Robin Bloor. If you were in for the last presentation, that was my company, Algebraics Data. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of that.
Okay, so what we're really talking about here is blockchain technology, what it can do, where it's going to change things, what it's going to disrupt, and particularly how you yourself maybe will be responsible for a revolution somewhere. Robin, I'll go ahead and let you talk. Tell me, what is the most interesting thing in the blockchain space that you're aware of? It doesn't have to be your stuff, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Well, I'm not really here to. I mean, we just did a promotion session here, if you like. So, I'd like to introduce the following idea. I think it's a powerful idea. It will be instantiated over a period of time. It certainly isn't going to happen very, very quickly. But I just want everybody to think about the idea of a contract, and to think about anybody doing anything for anybody else. And if you can automate that in software, then you can create a decentralization that possibly didn't exist anymore. So I believe that the blockchain ultimately will actually decentralize, the structure of corporations. I think it's way more dramatic in terms of what it can do than a lot of the people who are talking about it now. Because in the long term, we will just get better and better in defining smart contracts and enforcing smart contracts. And the trust that normally is required of large organizations is going to vanish into the software. How about that?
Excellent.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just continue with this conversation. So it's kind of on what Robin was just saying, but what I'm excited to be seeing lately in the industry is more of a blockchain lifestyle. You see a number of countries right now and independent sectors, for example, like Catalonia right now is talking about it, implementing blockchain into the currency of the actual country. So, for example, we're doing some work in Mauritius, and Mauritius is a small country off the coast of Africa. They're setting up a number of smart city ecosystems, kind of like entire cities that are accelerators, and a number of those cities are going to be based on a completely Ethereum-based network as the currency of the entire city. And I think, touching on what he was saying, having all transactions in a city run off a cryptocurrency or even on these contracts, I think it's a very interesting dynamic in changing the way that transactions happen between people. I mean, even in industry, even in like applications like, let's say, a plumber, right? You have a plumber come to your house. If you can do that transaction through a contract, I think it adds a lot of security in the actual work that gets done. And so I'm really excited to see just a change in the overall dynamic of transactions and currencies through the blockchain being implemented into actual entire economies.
Okay, well, I guess I'm excited to see more craziness and in Bitcoin, because I felt like things were very subdued lately. So.
Yeah, so to follow that, I guess I would just say that essentially Bitcoin and blockchain provides such a revolutionary tool for people who are unbanked. Essentially, there are over 2.5 billion people globally who has no access to a bank account, and I think, to me at least, that provides them with the freedom to lead a better life, and that's essentially why I think things like design matters in terms of making blockchain and Bitcoin more accessible and more mainstream, because this is a revolution that needs to happen, and it will better people's lives. So it's very important. Yeah.
So first I got to complain a little. Robin kind of stole my thunder there, because I was going to mention roughly the same thing. So actually, we at Decred, we have been working towards getting towards that goal that you actually described, at a virtual corporation, if you will. DAO is a bit of a tainted word these days, but we are actively working towards getting to a point where the technology is actually running the business, and it's all done via contracts, smart contracts, and completely digitally.
Okay, so yeah, so we have the smart contracts, we have all this revolution, we have all these changes, but there's got to be a downside, Marco. Can't all be roses. What's the downside? What is the opposition? Pick one.
Well, so the downside needs to be minimized, is what I would like to add there. So you need to have the proper tension in the system that is going to incentivize the proper behavior. Sorry, I would not, okay. No, but that would be actually my answer to that, is that there's always a downside, there's always a negative. And the only thing you can do is promote the right kind of behavior with a good incentive structure.
Okay. Elizabeth, do you have any ideas?
I would like to pass this on to
Okay. Daniel's got to have a downside.
Sorry, what was the question?
What is the downside to this blockchain? We talked about all the things it can do good. What is the risk? What's the downside? What's going to go wrong?
Oh. Well,
It could leave us
lots
speechless.
of people could invest in silly ideas and lose all of their money.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Okay.
I think one of the things that's actually happening in amongst the people that I meet, especially I'm an enthusiast for all of this technology, so and pretty much everybody here is. The idea that this is going to be the solution to everything, I think, is a dangerous thing. It's like there are whole, if you talk about computer architecture, for example, which I've been doing computer architecture for quite a long time, there are going to be architectural situations where this is a really bad solution. And people are still going to go for it because that's kind of what happened in the dot-com era. You had lots of dot-coms which were just crazy and never succeeded and still haven't succeeded. Furniture.com is my favorite, still isn't one. And it's like, I think that's the dangerous thing. I think, people will, anyway, it extends the last point. People will do stupid things, and people will invest in those stupid things and lose a lot of money.
Well, so let's dig into the ICO thing, right? Because what Daniel was referring to is like probably the top maybe risk right now in going into blockchain. Does it have a potential to stall things, to tarnish reputations, to cause regulation, needless regulation that hurts people that are in this space? Does any of that resonate with you guys as a risk? Not really?
The regulation thing, I think, is a curious thing because you're going to have, the most impactful regulation that exists right now is GDPR. It comes out of Europe, but applies to every organization in the world. And it won't be stopped because of that, and especially because what they're advocating is going to be very popular amongst people who are not Europeans. It's likely to become a global thing. So that's like
what?
GDPR, Global Data Protection Regulations. Right.
Okay.
And people in America have not heard of this much, but I've been studying it because, apart from writing the white paper for algebraics, I actually needed to know what our ethos was. So I looked around to see what the ethos actually existed out there, not just in blockchain technology, but in ownership of data. So, I studied that. So that's kind of interesting. If you're going to regulate something that is not a national thing, you've got to do it globally. And I don't think that's actually going to happen to a lot of what's happening in the blockchain space. But it is happening with ICOs because investors tend to have to invest in various regimes. So we've recently had the invention of the SAFT, which is what a lot of things that previously were ICOs should have been. And I won't go into that in any depth because it's like it becomes complicated and goes on for hours and hours. So there's that. And I think there's also the fact that there are two types of coin. One is a utility coin, which is the coin has a function of itself other than being a currency. And then there are currency coins. And I think those two things are completely different situations. And I think that the ICO, well, first of all, now in the US, you can't do an ICO for a utility coin. You have to do a SAFT first before you do an ICO, or you have to launch the capability first. So, that's the regulation in the US. I'll shut up. I've been talking too long.
Yeah. So we just came from Coin Agenda. We were there 2-3 days ago, and there was a panel with a number of lawyers, people running funds in the space, and they were talking about this exact question about, what's going to come down in this space that's going to regulate it and affect things. And I'm going to talk primarily on a US-based scale, but they almost all fully expect that regulations will come in the space, and these regulations, though they will increase the level of security and such amongst ICOs and make them something that's, a little bit more professional. And we've seen that developing over like the past 3-4 months. Every month in this space seems to be like a year in real world time. But with that change, you're starting to see it's harder for regular people to access these technologies and to access these ICOs because it's getting to the point where we can really only accept accredited investors. And the rules haven't even come down yet, but we're just making these changes in anticipation of these rules. So even the fear of regulation is stifling some of what we can do in the space. And it has good parts to it and bad parts to it, but I'm very interested to see where the space goes over the next, probably year to 2 years, and there is more clarity on what we can actually do in the space.
Well, the other thing about ICOs is they're throwing a bunch of funds into the space. Doesn't that accelerate development? Daniel, do you have an idea about accelerating development and technology in this space, or what do you find most interesting that's actually moving technology-wise?
Well, I mean, there's no amount of money that's so big it can't be wasted. So, I mean, I just don't think that something exciting. I mean, I'm really interested in figuring out how to make a Bitcoin fork that's going to gain more value than the core chain. That's what I think is most interesting.
Oh, no, dig into that. So why do you, what about forks? How does that going to push blockchain? What are you thinking there?
Well, I want Bitcoin to be investor controlled. So if and I think that the core team is not, doesn't want to do what produces the most value in Bitcoin. They want to implement their plan, and they don't want to provide evidence that their plan is the most valuable possible plan. So investor controlled means all rule changes in Bitcoin must provably increase the value of Bitcoin. At least provide some evidence. I don't think you could provide proof of that, but
Yeah, because if you could provide proof, it'd be a lot easier to do a startup.
yeah, right, yeah.
Well, Elizabeth, what do you think about any of this in terms of your own interests and your own goals? I mean, you've already expressed interest in the unbanked.
Yeah. It's it's pretty difficult to say. I don't really know if I have anything to add of value that's not already been expressed.
Yeah,
essentially, yeah.
Well, what are you doing right now? Tell me a little bit about what your current activities are in this space and what you're trying to develop.
Okay, so right now I am working with startups and cryptocurrencies, especially in Copenhagen, Denmark, to make sure that they are communicating with their customers and clients in a way that's profitable for them, essentially. So making sure that their storefront, which is their website and their user experience on their apps and their product design, is working for them and not against them. And I think it's a funny thing, like the cryptocurrency and blockchain environment. It's such a revolutionary and great technology that we all work with, but when it comes to communicating how great that technology is and what it can do for people, it's not that awesome. Like I'm so sorry, but it's like
No.
a WordPress page is not going to cut it if you want to communicate how great your product or your service is. And I think that's really, really key to remember when you have a business in this space, and you want to grow your business in the blockchain community, regardless of who your customer or consumer is. You have to remember that your website, your app, whatever, it has to speak for you, and you only have 0.5 milliseconds to convince your customers that they should buy from you and they should trust you. So let the design work for you and not against you. So that was a bit off track, but
Yeah, well, so the bottom line is what we have here on the stage, guys, is we have 4 people who are very deep into the back end, you know, the technology of how things work, and we have 1 person who is concerned about how that looks, at least in terms of focus in what you do, how it looks to users. How many people out here have actually used a wallet or used a website for cryptocurrency, and you looked at it and you thought, huh? I don't understand. Okay? So a lot of people are listening to you. Now the question is, what are the barriers to getting these people to realize that there are hands that get raised when you ask a question like that? How do you have trouble getting these people to listen to you?
I mean, I think we all know great design once we see it, but people who are usually in this space don't necessarily think of design as that important, or they don't really know where to start in terms of visuality and aesthetics and how to create design that speaks to a global audience, because that's essentially what Bitcoin and blockchain can do, right? Like it's a tool that can work around the world because it's digital and it's for everyone. So the trick is talk to someone who wants to help you and wants to look at your design. It doesn't have to cost anything. It doesn't have to cost much, at least. Just get someone to look at it and who can see it from your consumer's point of view. That's really, really important. Unless your consumer or your basic client or consumer is someone who's also in the space, who understands the cryptocurrency or like is only interested in the code or the tech behind it, then that might be okay. Otherwise, always think of the consumer and essentially try not to think about when you're communicating to a consumer. Try not to think about, I want to show the consumer and the clients what's your technology, what your product, what your service can do. Try to show them why it can change their lives, why it is the best on the market, why it is something that that can, infinitely improve their lives as it is. So always think of the reason why it is so important and communicate that.
Okay, there's one guy on the stage that may or may not be listening to you that's in the position to implement it. That would be Marco. Marco, he runs Decred, and it I assume has to have UI considerations and whatnot. Does any of this resonate with y'all's approach to how you're deploying Decred?
Excuse me. So yes, it does. But I want to touch on something that Daniel just said. Though.
Absolutely.
I have to react to that. So that product exists. It's called Decred, where the stakeholders get to run the blockchain, and it provides value. Check us out. So that said, the UI portions are incredibly important. I'm extremely sensitive to it. When we actually started to become a little bit more widely used, we got creamed by users like, this is way too hard. You guys are, technology is way too complicated. I made my wife read the website. She yelled at me. I mean, and she was right? So and that is really, really important. In fact, at Decred right now, we are working really hard to make the documentation human readable. And we're trying to make the wallets much more user-friendly. We're not there yet. We are nowhere near completion on that. But we need people like you to keep driving these innovations that actually are going to make these incredible technologies available for general use, and not just a bunch of crypto nerds that have been doing this for way too long.
Okay, guys, we're gonna stop here for questions. So if anybody would raise their hand, anybody? No, I'm kidding. Here you go.
Hey, how goes it? All right, so my question is, what mainstream industry will you think adopt Bitcoin or blockchain technology for mainstream adoption first? Media, entertainment, real estate, something like that.
Well, I mean, I think the most important people are investors who want to evade capital controls and inflation. So I'm not looking for a particular industry to adopt it, just, people who want to evade capital controls and inflation.
I suspect it's going to be retail. I mean, to a certain extent, it's already happened. So you've got Overstock, which is now deep into cryptocurrency. But I think it's going to go mainstream in terms of e-retail, and it'll go mainstream simply because it'll be the cheapest way to buy. We're just waiting for, the numbers to get to that point and for the technology to become as cheap as possible. And I think that's not even going to be stopped. I don't think anybody's going to be able to oppose that,
Do you have something? Oh, come on. Ethereum has got to have a use case that's... Shirley, you talked about smart cities. Is it going to run the infrastructure?
Well, I don't see that being the first thing that's going to get addressed, but
smart cities.
yeah, they are right now in Mauritius.
And how long will that take?
Well, they're actually okay. I'll talk about that now, right? So we're working with a guy named James Duchene, and James Duchene is he's technically a part of the government of Mauritius. He's part of their board, and he's the U.S. representative, right? And so he's kind of the one leading the movement of bringing blockchain to Mauritius. And you can go read a number of articles about this movement that's happening. But the idea originally was to just create a startup ecosystem within Mauritius, somewhere where people can come and create ideas. The tax laws are a lot simpler, the regulations a lot easier. And as blockchain has developed, James, being that that's what he's in as well, wanted to implement that into Mauritius. So yeah, they're setting up an ecosystem right now where any blockchain-based startup can go over to Mauritius, start their company in Mauritius, get regulation there. If they want to do an ICO, they have the ICO regulatory sandbox that they can do there. But they're setting up an ecosystem where everything runs on the blockchain. I mean, taking a bus runs on the blockchain. Going to the grocery store, all of that will be running on the blockchain. And he's saying that the first city is going to be released within the next 6 months, and that they're hoping to have an ecosystem of like 20 of them across the island over the next 3 to 5 years. So I guess that is, I mean, that's not that long. But retail, as he's saying, is already starting to adopt. But yeah, I mean, there's beyond that, a lot of industry. I mean, being from Houston, we go to the Houston Bitcoin meetup very regularly, and oil and gas industry is adopting it right now. So.
Yes. So, as I have pointed out a couple times, I'm a new investor, and I'm not a technical guy. I'm your opposite. So I'm looking for that easy entry, and I got into this thing very recently because I read that Amazon was going to accept Bitcoin. It was a foregone conclusion on the 26th, and so I rushed to put money in before the 26th. So I run up against this wall. I live in the world of cash and dollars and credit, and how do I get into Bitcoin? So my first thing was Coinbase, and my God, what a nightmare, okay? And by the way, I stayed online twice, an hour waiting for them to answer. When they finally answered, in both cases, they disconnected me. The person at the other end said, well, try not to disconnect. I said, if you do, could you call me back? Oh, no, we never make calls back. Okay, so twice I did. So finally, I got a little money in, but I got like $750 in, and that was it. So I ended up at a place called Genesis, and I had to trust them and wire the money, and I did all this stuff. And then, in the meantime, I heard there's this conference. Okay, but it's the hardest thing in the world. Now, I agree with what you say. There's people out there that need it. The thing that comes to mind is Venezuela and North Korea. Two places. Venezuela, I live in Miami. I know a lot of Venezuelan people. They're actually, some people are burned alive for food right now because they tried to eat. So how are you guys going to make this so it's like Google, so I type my name in and da-da-da-da-da, and I get my money into Bitcoin or whatever?
That's an impassioned plea for an on-ramp.
Yeah.
And you're from Houston?
I'm from Miami.
Well, let's pretend you're from Houston because it works better. I've been driving around trying to get on a freeway in Houston, and there's no on-ramps. Why don't they build an on-ramp? That's so annoying. They invented Bitcoin before Bitcoin, but go ahead.
Yeah. So the first thing is every website, for example, Coinbase is actually a good example of someone who is very user-friendly, I would say. It's shocking, yes, but that's probably the most user-friendly exchange you can find out there right now. I'm so sorry if anyone else has a great example of an exchange, but that's how it is right now. The second thing is, if you have an exchange or if you want to get in the space, then there's not that it's not that easy, and I totally agree with you, because you're actually in the position of so many other consumers that these people in this room want to build something for. And I think everyone should take note of the fact that it was so difficult for you to get into the space and to create a wallet. Yeah. Yeah, it's just a matter of creating better interfaces and a better user experience, and it's should, yeah.
I can bore you guys to tears about this. So I actually feel your pain. So
No tears.
okay, no tears. No, but this is a real concern. So, but I'm going to agree actually that Coinbase is a pretty good website. However, here comes the real thing, though, is that the banking industry is actively lobbying against these things being accessible. So the issue with Coinbase is not that the website sucks. The issue is that they have regulatory systems in place that they can only transfer $750 a month, what is it, a year or something. Then you gotta, strip naked, send your driver's license in, your firstborn baby. It's ridiculous, right? So so the real issue is really regulatory and actual. Pretty much the government is in the way, right? Because they want to get paid, right? The man needs to be paid, and currently they're not. So there's a little bit of a disconnect. Okay. So the way this is going to get better is by people voting in certain ways to find a more friendly regulatory system. And then on top of that, we need more Coinbases, more than one, and so that there's actual competition. So Coinbase is hurting because you are not getting a good experience, right? So it doesn't work for them. They want to take your money, right? Right, no, so, but I close my accounts too because, like, screw this, I don't want to deal with this. And it is painful. So I want to add one more thing to it. So actually, one of the better ways of getting or acquiring coin is actually to contract with some of these projects, because you can get paid in for example, Decred or Bitcoin or whatever your flavor is. And we have been attracting actually a large group of developers that have started working on our project. And the reason they're actually there is that they don't have to do the on-ramp. So they provide work and services. They get paid in cryptocurrency, and now they're players, right? Now they get to be part of the ecosystem.
Well, there is a guy in Miami that has actual change machines, ATMs. Yeah. How does that work?
Well, wait. Yeah, I'm gonna let you have your question.
Sure.
Well, wait, I just wanted to say that, like, voting isn't going to do anything because we're up against a vested interest. So, you know, I think your solution is very optimistic. And also, why shouldn't people have to work to get into Bitcoin? I mean, it's so good that I just don't. I'm not worried about that. Plus, I want Bitcoin investors to be smarter, so they should have to work to get into it.
And has anybody opened up a new bank account recently? Because I did recently, right? And it's as hard to open up a new bank account with a bank you don't know of as it is to open up a Coinbase thing. It's know your customer, it's AML, and they have to go through that. It's the law. Nobody in the crypto business could easily do anything like that, because in order to actually accept dollars for crypto, you have to have banking licenses in 50 states. Basically, that's the problem. I mean, I'm just...
ATM get around that?
Sorry?
The ATM. There's ATMs in Miami.
You have to have Bitcoin to get the stuff out.
Oh, okay.
And so you've got to have been in there to get it out.
Anyway, go ahead. Ask your question.
Yeah. To go along with this discussion, the user experience for cryptocurrencies is difficult. I think we can all agree with that. I think maybe one of the reasons for that is not so much lack of trying, but lack of education amongst the population who want to get into cryptocurrencies. This is a system that is radically different than all other computer systems in the world that people are used to interacting with, and it requires a mind shift for people to understand what's going on in a cryptocurrency, in a blockchain. It requires self-sufficiency, self-education in order to use this system, because there is no reliance on third parties to talk to when something goes wrong. So I think that, I just want to get your opinion on how education and user experience can be joined into one thing so that it makes it easier for people to use or understand, or is there some abstraction there that can be done to educate people without them knowing that they're being educated on a new type of system?
That one's a tough one.
Well, I can say things, but it's like it's not going to answer the problem.
No, it
it's
isn't.
like,
It isn't.
We have this word wallet. What is a wallet? Well, it's not actually a wallet.
No.
No, it's an account.
Well, no,
Right,
it's not
and
that
it's
either.
not exactly a count either. Right? So it's like we have a whole new concept here, which is, I think, wallet/account, and it may have other connotations. And when you get something like this happening, we invent new words, or we use old words but shift the meaning. And that just is a matter of people getting used to it, because that's the way that is. You know, the idea of having really good designers design for these cryptocurrency applications is great, but a lot of that is actually happening. It's not that it isn't happening. It's just that you've also got some startups where that isn't happening, so it's variety.
Go ahead. I was going to touch on your point. Not 100% certain on the education side, but even still, I mean, as all of us in this room think that crypto is going crazy right now, it's still at a point where the mass majority of people have no idea what crypto is. And so I think the first thing is still awareness. And like he was saying, he just read an article that Amazon was adding Bitcoin, and that's what brought him into the space. When they actually do implement something like that, and it's in everybody's life, and they go into their account and they see this thing called Bitcoin, I'm assuming Amazon's going to give them some type of tutorial on what, maybe just information note where they can read about it, get aware of the space, and it's going to bring a lot more people into the space that maybe do have the answer for how to start educating people. I don't know how we're going to get to that point yet, because it is a technologically advanced industry. But I think it can get done in just bringing as many people as we can into this space that can help develop it and answer that question. So I think it's going to start with awareness and just forcing it into people's lives, basically.
Okay, we have 5 minutes. We have a whole lot of people. We're going into piranha mode. That means I let people ask a question. You don't get to say a lot. You get to answer. You don't get to say a lot. Okay? And if that looks like I'm rude, let Elizabeth, ladies first.
I just wanted to add a quick note for that one. I think the most important thing you can try to remember is don't try to educate people about what the technology is. That doesn't work. Try to educate them about why it will improve their lives, essentially. Remember that.
Don't try to educate people. Make them learn it themselves.
He's rough. So I would only throw out there that working for Bitcoin is a great idea. However, it is not bringing new money into the system. It's spreading existing Bitcoins around other people. I would look at some pools because some pools emit $9 million of Bitcoin a day.
I don't know what that question is. Well, anyway. It's a comment. That's fine. Here you go.
Opinions on S2X upcoming and the outcomes.
Okay, this is quick, Daniel.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, I'm for fighting, and I don't know what the outcome will be.
Okay, guys, I promised there were a lot of questions, so get your hands up so I can see where I'm going.
Can y'all talk about the trade-off between fraud or the risk of fraud and deregulation? Because I hear you talking about, it's so hard to sign on to Coinbase, but the thing is that they're on the line if there's a fraudulent transaction, right? This is moving from account to account. That's the difference between the traditional, money system and blockchain technology, right? It's instantaneous. So they don't have a way to recall the money back to that account. And so I think that's why, if you say, why is that taking so long? To get an account, it has to do with fraud.
The biggest fraudsters are the government and the banking system, so there's always less fraud if you deregulate.
Anybody else gets a sentence if you want to do that while I'm looking for a hand. Okay. Nobody? Nobody had any other sentence? That's fine. Go ahead.
I just was wondering if anyone knows where we're at in implementing this in the field of medicine. Blockchain.
Well, actually,
I'm going to do that one.
You got to answer that.
We have at Factum a contract with the Gates Foundation, and what we're doing, Factum is all about data on the blockchain. So this is a technology we really haven't talked about here, but that's fine because I'm doing it now. And so, because this is piranha mode, the bottom line is we are creating an audit trail behind patients that is linked to biometrics because in Africa, there are NGOs, there are relief organizations, there are government organizations that provide care hit and miss on these people. And when they come in and they get a medical history, you can't tell what it is. And there are diseases like HIV and others that if you start treatment over again, you just kill the patient, which is a bad outcome. Therefore, we're creating this audit trail so that when a person shows up in a clinic, we can figure out where the medical records are and be able to treat them. And that's an ongoing project. Yes.
So what about chain interoperability? Are any of your projects working on that? And why is it feels like it's just not on anyone's radar? Is it on yours? And,
I'll take that one. So actually, it is happening. In fact, we just launched, I think it's the first real user-facing implementation where you can do cross-blockchain atomic swaps. So we can disintermediate completely the need for an exchange, which is pretty exciting new technology. So you and I can agree on a price. You're going to give me 1 Bitcoin. I'm going to give you 100 Decred. And then there's no third party. And there's no possibility for fraud.
Good. I was looking at the coin.
Go ahead.
I was looking at the CoinMarketCap.com list this morning and just realized that every single name on that list had been mentioned sometime in the last 2 days, either for or against or not at all. The only one that I have, no one said the word Monero, and I was just curious why. First impressions, anything?
They're one of the few altcoins that are doing something interesting, but I don't know enough about them myself.
Monero is largely focusing on privacy and anonymous transactions, and they're having trouble with transaction due to a lack of infrastructure that goes back to Elizabeth's point, decent wallets and that sort of thing. But that's all I can really tell you as to why people aren't quite talking about it compared to Dash and Decred and some others that are really pouring a lot of energy into that interface. So I'm going to give that answer. Is that good with you guys?
Yeah, Zcash as well is competitive to that. But,
Right.
there may be even more.
Okay. Guys, this is Piranha mode. You get to ask your questions. Whoa. There you go.
How do you feel about banks' efforts to try to patent blockchain technology? Do you think maybe we should have some kind of organization that files for some kind of patent protection for a decentralized system? Or do you think it's a threat, basically? Can they patent Bitcoin?
That's a really good question. I actually don't know the answer, but I'm against it.
I would like to touch on that one, actually. So the answer, I think, is no. That would be the quick answer. And the reason is that the technologies that are being used in Bitcoin are actually all relatively old and mature technologies. Were just brought together in a pretty novel way. So my answer would be probably not.
And they're fully documented, and documentation invalidates patents.
Yeah, there's a lot of, yeah.
And software patents are really very, very hard to enforce with recent rulings. So we shouldn't terribly worry about patents, and I'm only interjecting because this is the end of this panel. Guys, I really, really appreciate y'all participating in the panel as the audience, and please give a hand for all of our panelists up here.